Hello, and welcome to Needle Handling and Safety. Today's training will cover needle nomenclature, proper handling techniques, bubble clearing, stabilization, refinements, and etiquette. Most of the time, you'll be working with syringes and needles in an environment that requires some form of PPE. You'll notice I'm not wearing a mask today. This is to ensure you can hear and understand the video. However, in real life, make sure you are wearing all of the PPE required for the area in which you are working. Now, let's get started with needle and syringe anatomy. A standard needle setup consists of a straight metal needle and a hub, usually made of plastic. The hub is what attaches the needle to the syringe. Depending on specific brands and sizes, these hubs may just pop onto a smooth tip or may screw onto a grooved end of the syringe. Of course, all needles have an opening at the end. Most of the time, this opening is actually on the side of the end of the needle, not at the very tip like you might expect. This side opening is called the bevel. It's important to note the location of the bevel before you pierce the tissue because some injections need to be given in a particular orientation to minimize tissue damage. You should always make sure to use the correct size of needle for your species and substance. Needles come in different gauges and lengths. The gauge of the needle represents the diameter. It is a bit counterintuitive, but larger gauges mean smaller diameters. Thus, a 23 gauge needle is actually larger than a 30 gauge needle. Most of the time, smaller needles, larger gauge numbers, cause less discomfort upon injection, but choosing too small of a needle can make it difficult to inject substances in a timely manner. If you're unsure of which gauge needle to use, ask an experienced member of your group or reach out to our training team for advice. The second measurement is pretty straightforward, as the length of the needle is typically denoted in inches. Make sure your chosen needle is long enough to access your desired location, but short enough to minimize risk of inadvertent tissue damage. Now that we've chosen the needle we want, let's consider the syringe itself. This part of the syringe is called the hub, and it is where the hub of the needle attaches. Once attached, almost all needle setups will have some dead space where the needle meets the syringe hub. This means a small amount of liquid will remain here even after you give the injection. You should keep this in mind when using precious and/or controlled substances. The largest part of your syringe is called the barrel, or the body of the syringe. It contains the measurement markings so you know how much substance is contained inside. Inside the barrel is the plunger. The plunger usually has a black end on it, making it easier to see the volume contained. The first time you use any syringe, the plunger can be a bit sticky. Thus, it can be beneficial to prime the plunger to make it easier to draw back and allow for a smoother injection. This is really important if you're trying to draw blood from a very small vessel, since any instability can lead to trauma of the vessel. When choosing a syringe size, you need to consider the volume you need to inject, as well as the precision needed in the measurements. Smaller syringe volumes allow for more precise measurements. You also need to realize that once you fill up the syringe with whatever you are injecting, the plunger will be pushed out the back side of the syringe. Filling a syringe all the way to max volume can make the plunger difficult to control, and it may be better to use a larger syringe. No matter what size setup you're using, whenever you are working with a needle, use slow and controlled movements. Never rush, and never point the needle towards yourself. Both of these increase the chances of an incident. Now that we know the equipment we will be using, let's put them together and attach the needle to the syringe. Hold the needle in one hand and the syringe in the other. Notice how at no point do I have the tip of the needle oriented towards myself. I simply attach the two together. When doing this, you want to keep both the actual needle and the inside of the syringe sterile. So only handle the cap of the needle, never the needle itself or the hub, and handle the barrel of the syringe, again, never the hub of that syringe. Put the slightest pressure on and gently twist a little to make sure that they're securely attached. Again, some syringes may actually have grooves that allow you to screw the needle onto the syringe versus a smooth tip syringe that just pop on like this one did. Now, to actually use the needle, we need to remove the cap. The key here is to avoid small, brisk movements, as those can create recoil, leading to an accidental needle stick. We like to say the best approach is to make it big and pretty. Not too big, but big enough to avoid injury. Ideally, you're fully prepped and ready to use your needle at this point. But if you do need to place your needle down momentarily, make sure to prop it on the cap, or even a nearby pen to keep it sterile. You never want the body of your needle coming in contact with the table surface or a cage top. And even if you were to lay it down very carefully flat on the table, it's extremely difficult to pick it back up without contaminating that needle. At the University of Washington, recapping needles by hand is strictly forbidden. This is because it's the easiest way to accidentally poke yourself with a used needle, and it's totally unnecessary. After using your needle, you should put it straight into a sharps container without recapping it. If for any reason you must recap your needle, you must always use a sharps recapper. Again, it's usually best just discard the entire needle into the sharps container with your syringe as soon as you use it. But sometimes it is necessary to remove that needle for various reasons. Just like uncapping in the first place, be careful to avoid recoil when you are removing the needle from your syringe. Use big, smooth movements to remove the needle in a single motion. Sometimes that needle can be really stuck on your syringe. Never fight it. If needed, use a tool, such as an old pair of hemostats that will no longer be used in surgery, to assist you.